We're live.
Hello. I'm sorry?
Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay. I'm Michiel Borkent from the Netherlands, and I will present how I ported a macOS Clojure dev development to Windows WSL2. I've only recently started using WSL, and so this will just be an experience report of the painful points, but also the glorious moments that I enjoyed during installation and porting the dev setup. My internet name is BorgDude, so if you want to reach out, you can easily find me on Twitter or wherever. So a little bit about me, my background. I've been a Clojure and ClojureScript developer for over 10 years. Clojure is a functional programming language, and it's also a Lisp. I can't go much into depth because of the time, but that's the programming language I'm using, and it runs on the JVM, and it compiles also to JavaScript. So it's a full stack programming language. I moved to Mac also roughly 10 years ago because the tooling for Clojure was just a lot better on Mac than on Windows, and also I kind of not liked command.exe, and I think I don't have to explain that to anyone here. And I like the flexibility of laptops, but I also like the power that a full desktop gives me. So in the ideal case, I would like to combine these two. In my spare time, I work on mainly two open source projects, both in Clojure, and one is called Babeshka. And Babeshka is a scripting solution that lets you use Clojure instead of Bash for scripting, but still with the startup time of Bash. So normally Clojure runs on the JVM, but this Babeshka program is compiled to native using GraalVM. So you have startup time within milliseconds instead of seconds. But you can still program using Clojure. And the other project I'm doing is a linter for Clojure. So it detects errors while you're typing in your editor. It's also compiled to native using GraalVM. And so I want to support this for all the three major operating systems: Microsoft, Windows, macOS, and Linux. So for me, it's very nice if I have easy access to all these operating systems. I'm also doing work for Dr. Evidence, which is a company specializing in technology around medical knowledge and literature. And the product I'm working on is called DocSearch, and you can find a free demo on the link that's on the screen now. I will share these slides later. But this is also, everything is done in Clojure and ClojureScript. But this is, what I want to port my development environment for. So I bought a new PC to have maximum power. I put the maximum amount of memory in it, 128 gigs, and I bought a Ryzen processor. So it's with 16 cores, so it's a very fast machine. And the equivalent Mac Pro machine would cost me 3 times more than I have paid for this machine. So it's, I would have paid $9,000 basically to get the same kind of hardware. But I want to use this as a remote dev machine because I still like my laptops and I like to work from anywhere I like, from the couch or from a coffee place or whatever. But if I build a PC myself, there is no Mac OS, which I'm used to. So now what? And because I heard a lot of good things about WSL2, I thought I should try that. So now my experience. So I had no Windows machines in my home, and I tried to make a bootable USB stick on macOS. There were various blog posts about it. I tried it several times, but every time I installed Windows, at some point in the installation process, Windows would say that something was not all right with my USB. So the only solution I could find is call a friend who had a Windows laptop, and he made one for me, using a program called Rufus. So maybe there's an opportunity for Microsoft there if they want to win over people from macOS, like create a Mac program that can easily create a bootable installation medium. But when I passed that hurdle, so I just installed the basic ingredients, remote desktop, of course, to work on the machine remotely, Ubuntu, Windows Terminal, Docker with the WSL2 integration, of course. And one of the first things I did in the WSL Terminal was change my starting directory from the Windows home directory to the Ubuntu directory. But that was fairly easily done using the configuration file in the terminal. And also what I had to do was limit the amount of memory that WSL2 could access from my system. So I gave WSL2 92 gigs, and the rest, 36 gigs, was for Windows. So this is how I limited. I think WSL2 has a better limits by default now, so that should maybe not be a problem, but it's configurable. So how? I wanted to transfer my existing setup from macOS, from a macOS laptop, and I had a lot of ZSH scripts there that set environment variables and created SSH tunnels to other machines. And I also wanted to copy a couple of databases. So the first thing I needed was rsync. And to rsync my stuff to the machine, I had to enable SSH, which was fairly easy, sudo service SSH start. But then I had the question, how can I enable this on boot? So every time I restart my Windows machine, I don't want to manually enter sudo service SSH start. And maybe you could do this using systemd, but that wasn't very clear to me. And maybe WSL2 should also already be running for that to work. And also the other problem was I could not SSH into the machine if Windows Firewall didn't forward the port and didn't open the port. But I found a very good PowerShell script for that in the comments of issue 4150 on the WSL repo. And this PowerShell script, you can enter a couple of ports and they will all be forwarded from Windows to WSL2, and the ports will also be opened to public networks. And that was exactly what I want, because I'm working from my laptop at home on my remote development machine. So I also wanted to start this WSL and SSH at login. And well, the easiest workaround for this that I could find is just create a scheduled task for it and then enter WSL -u root and then sudo service SSH start. And I did the same for opening the firewall ports. So that's also in the issue about the firewall ports. So maybe there's better ways, but this is how I got things working. So yeah, when I was finished syncing my scripts, to my surprise, all my ZSH scripts basically all worked on WSL2. And so I started my Docker containers for work. I started 2 JVM processes, and one closure script process, which builds the closure script. And it basically all worked to my surprise. So what I'm also using is Tailscale, which sets up a VPN between my laptop and my remote machine. So when I go outside my home, I can still use the same IP address, and I don't have to open any ports in my home router, because that's all done through this Tailscale VPN service. And so I can always connect to my development web server through the same IP in my home, but also outside my home. And even the hot reloading of the JavaScript works through a web socket, even if I'm like kilometers away from my home. So yeah, I was amazed by that. So my editor is Emacs, my primary editor. I tried a couple of different ways to run Emacs, like through an SSH-X server tunnel, or mounting all the files via SSH-FS. And also I tried running Emacs locally through Tramp, but all these approaches had downsides. For example, the Fuse SSH-FS solution was very slow if you did things with Megit, which is the Git plugin for Emacs. So I settled on using Emacs in the terminal for now, and with a couple of extra plugins, it's actually not that bad. So I also had to fix a couple of key bindings in iTerm2, which is the terminal program on Mac. Well, but that was manageable using some blog posts that I could find about that. But actually, there was one other solution that I was mind blown about, which is VS Code. And if you install SSH extension, all your plugins will work exactly the same as if you're working locally. So here I am logged into my remote machine, and I'm editing my code. And the linter that I developed is also available as a VS Code plugin. And that just runs on your remote machine, but you're seeing the feedback as if you're working locally. And when you're editing a file, there is no lag, because it first downloads the file to your editor, and then when you hit save, it gets saved on your remote machine. So everything works kind of seamlessly. So this is like out of the box, the best experience that I could find for working remotely and editing files remotely on the machine. So let me end with one pain point and one amazing point about WSL, or actually Windows rather. So shortly after I installed my Windows system and I went to dinner, the system rebooted on me. And this was because of Patch Tuesday. So they release patches, and then your system reboots at a time that you're not working. But I'm usually working late into the evenings, and the default was until 5 o'clock, and after that you're not active. So I hated that, and I found a setting in the group policy to turn that off. But I had to do, it was not easy to find. So maybe, that could be improved maybe. But what I find amazing about WSL2 is that for example, I had to unzip a file in Windows, but I did not know how to do this from PowerShell or whatever. So I can just go into WSL2 and then unzip a file, and then which contains a Windows executable, and then run that same executable in the same shell, but it's a Windows executable. And yeah, so the blurry line between Linux and Windows, I think that's genius. And also the last command that I invoked there is shutdown -H using PowerShell, which means put my machine into hibernate. So on the weekends, I put my machine in hibernate, and on Monday, I turn it on again, and then it's exactly in the same state. And I can all do this from the WSL2 environment, which is yeah, it blew my mind, and I'm very enthusiastic about it. Maybe my next laptop will also be Windows and WSL2. Who knows? So that was it.
Awesome. That's great. It's my first introduction to Clojure, but I'm definitely going to check it out after that. And you said you maintain the VS Code extension that's a linter as well?
Yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and good luck with the rest of the conference.
Thank you. Thank you. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with Matthias in just a few minutes. Thanks, everyone.